Everyone got their phones on stun? Everyone got their phones on stun? And have you got your apps open for the scores? No? Okay. Are we ready? We're good. So, good afternoon, because it is afternoon, 2 minutes afternoon, and welcome to the Aspen Institute. I am Janet Topolsky, and I'm Executive Director of the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group, which is one of over 30 policy programs here at the Aspen Institute. We're delighted to welcome you here for the second in our series called America's Rural Opportunity. I want to mention that one of the things that Aspen CSG does is to connect, motivate, and energize leaders at the community level who are trying to build their regional economies and also advance people on the economic margins. Since 1985, Aspen CSG has done most of our work in rural America, and proudly so. As you well know, recent media headlines have put a lot of attention on rural America, and especially on the acute challenges that rural America is facing. But we've spent a lot of time in rural America, as have a number of people in this room, if not all of you. And I think, therefore, you know that we have some realizations that do run about rural America that run counter to some conventional wisdom or some public perceptions. So after yesterday's release, I noticed the release of the skinny budget by the administration yesterday, there have been some articles in the paper today in reaction to that budget. And a lot of them have quoted farmers and people working in agriculture. Well, one of the things that we've learned, it's really important, agriculture as a driver in the rural economy. But something a lot of people don't realize about rural America is that only 6% of the rural workforce works in agriculture. And in fact, 11% of the rural workforce works in manufacturing. And we can go on. So that sort of runs to counter, and it's important for America to understand that the sectors driving rural America are very diverse. They include energy, manufacturing, forestry, wood products, resource stewardship, tourism, service industries. They're all in rural America too. It's not only agriculture, though agriculture is important. We also know that from working in rural America, a deeper understanding of rural shows that there's a heck of a lot of hidden innovation happening in rural America that doesn't sort of hit the front pages of America's newspapers. There are a lot of leaders in rural regions that are collaborating to build on local assets to advance their economies. And actually, the other thing that we've learned is there's a heck of a lot of hunger in rural America to do more of this. We also know that community leaders at the community level in rural, typically have the most knowledge about what it is that helps them get ahead and what it is that keeps them from getting ahead, and that we can rely on their intelligence and knowledge in order to figure out what to do so that more can happen. And finally, we know that a healthy and more prosperous America requires a healthy, prospering rural America. So as a result, in partnership with the Rural Development Innovation Group, we at Aspen have launched this series to highlight stories of innovation that are building on local assets, that are succeeding in rural America. So before we get to today's stories, which you see represented here on this dais, let me introduce Deb Markley, who is co-founder of the Center for Rural Entrepreneurship and a member of our partner in this effort, a member of the Rural Development Innovation Group. So she's going to tell you what that group is and talk about today's theme.
Thank you, Janet, and thanks to all of you who've joined us today, both here in the room and out there live streaming in cyberface. Did my first Facebook Live yesterday, and we were supposed to start by saying hi, Facebook, so hi, live stream audience out there. I'm Deb Markley. I'm co-founder of the Center for Rural Entrepreneurship. We're a national nonprofit organization that works with rural community leaders to build a more prosperous future by supporting their business, social, and civic entrepreneurs. And we've worked in rural places across the country for the last 16 years, most often in partnership with trusted intermediary organizations like Communities Unlimited and Northern Initiatives that are on the program today. And we've witnessed firsthand the powerful impact that entrepreneurs can have on rural communities, bringing both innovation and leadership to the places that they care about. I'm also a really proud and committed member of the Rural Development Innovation Group, as Janet said. along with my colleagues who are listed on the back of your program. And I would just ask members of the Rural Development Innovation Group to stand up just for a minute, in case you want to grab any one of them afterwards to, they are all responsible collectively for the work that's going on here today. In 2015, the Northern Forest Center, Rob Riley and Joe Short, the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, Alan McGregor, somewhere in the audience back there, and the Aspen Institute Community Strategies Group. You've met Janet Travis Green. Her colleague is here somewhere as well. They invited a group of rural development innovators to come together for 1 year to lift up a new narrative for rural America. One that focuses on rural as an asset for the nation, the asset that it is, and points to the kinds of investments and innovative practices that are necessary to get more out of those assets and unlock those assets for the benefit of rural and for the country as a whole. We committed to learn together, to look at national trends and the implications for rural, to identify promising strategies, and to share those innovations and strategies more broadly. America's Rural Opportunity, this platform is a chance for us to share those strategies, to share America's Rural Opportunity with a broader audience. The Rural Development Innovation Group has been working together to identify and bring to you all very compelling stories of rural innovation that we can lift up and discuss and have as part of these conversations. I'm really excited that entrepreneurship is the topic for today. It's in our name, after all. We've devoted a lot of time to this topic. One of the main tenets of the Rural Development Innovation Group is that innovation is driven by people, ideas, and markets. And I don't think there's any better representation of that tenet than the entrepreneurs that are on the panel today and the entrepreneurs that are out there working across rural America. Whether we're talking about a micro-entrepreneur who's building a business to create a livelihood for her family, to a Main Street business that's really contributing to quality of place and the local economy, to a growth entrepreneur that's creating jobs and building sectors. These are the true rural innovators. I hate to tell my group that, but these are the true rural innovators out there. So you'll have an opportunity to hear 3 stories today of rural entrepreneurs and innovation. But I just want to add that over the course of the work that we've done, these are just representative of a whole range of entrepreneurs who are out there driving innovation and driving community transformation in rural places. So I'm really excited to be here today and to hear these stories. I'm going to get out of the way so we can listen to them together. So thanks for being here, and I'll turn it back to Janet.
All right, before we get started and I turn this over to Joyce, we do want to acknowledge and thank several organizations for their inaugural support of this series, and those include, besides the Aspen Institute, the Northern Forest Center, the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, Encourage Community Foundation in Wisconsin, the Lore Foundation, which partners with rural communities in the Mountain West, and as of this week, the Northwest Area Foundation, which does terrific work in Northwest United States. It also includes every member of the innovation group who is contributing their time and resources to be part of this effort. So we want to also mention, if you want to share your thoughts on today's discussion, we want you to do that. Please use hashtag, it's right up here, hashtag rural innovation. And to learn more and get updates and share your own stories of rural innovation, we'd love you to visit us at as.pn/rural, as.pn/rural, or you can also follow us on Twitter, and that's @ruralinnovators. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joyce. Joyce Klein is going to moderate our panel today. Joyce is a longtime colleague of mine, not just at Aspen, but before that at CFED. She is director of the Aspen Institute and, wait for it, Microenterprise Fund for Innovation, Effectiveness, Learning, and Dissemination, or FIELD. And it's an initiative within Aspen's Economic Opportunities Program. Joyce has more than 25 years, we think that's how many, 25 years of experience. Yeah, 25 years of experience studying and supporting microenterprise as well as entrepreneurial development across the United States, so she's great for this. She's also a keen and curious thinker. and questioner, and so we're delighted that she's agreed to lead the conversation today. I hand it to you, Joyce.
Hi, thank you, Janet. So I'm just going to add my welcome to everyone here and joining us by live stream. It's a real pleasure to be here partnering with the Community Strategies Group, one of our colleague programs here at Aspen, and also with the Rural Development and Innovation Group. I know some of the players, and I've had the pleasure of working with Deb and Rob and others over the years. So it's great to be here. As Janet said, I'm with the Economic Opportunities Program here, and my focus is really on entrepreneurship and business ownership as an economic opportunity strategy, which means we're focused on how helping folks to use business ownership as a way to connect to and try to thrive in our changing economy. So we focus a lot on low-income and moderate-income individuals who will want to use business ownership as a way to do better in our economy. And we work in both rural and urban communities in that work, but in that, over the years that I've been doing this work, it's really clear there's a set of particular challenges in rural America about helping folks to do that. So it's really a pleasure to dig into that topic today. Just one other framing comment I want to make that supports what Janet and Deb had to say this morning. We hosted another event yesterday at the Aspen Institute focused on inequality and opportunity, and Senator Mark Warner was there talking about what our nation needs to do to really adapt to this very rapidly changing economy that we find ourselves in. And he made the point that there's lots of innovation that's happening in rural communities. And so I think it's great that we can follow up today by really highlighting that work and the work that the Rural Development Innovation Group is doing to lift up those and strengthen those initiatives, and also try to get other communities that aren't yet innovating to be able to do that. So this is a great opportunity to do that, so thank you. It's a great panel today. I'm thrilled to be here. I have some folks who I've known of their work for many, many years, and others who I just met today who are doing great, great things. So I'm just going to briefly introduce them. They're each going to give you a bit of background on the work that they're doing, how and why, and then we're going to get into some Q&A, and then we're going to open up. I'm going to do a little bit of dialogue with them, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So I'm going to start by, I'm going to go down to my right here. And your left, I'm going to start by introducing Dennis West. Dennis is the CEO of Northern Initiatives. Northern Initiatives is a community development financial institution based in Marquette, Michigan, which is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He's joining us even though Michigan's going to start playing very soon. So, but who's counting? For folks who don't know, a community development financial institution is a financial institution, typically nonprofits, whose primary mission is community development. So they're focused on developing the community as opposed to generating profits or returns for shareholders or owners of that financial institution. And typically what they do is they blend a mix of private, public, and philanthropic money to be able to make loans that banks don't make, typically because they're too costly or too risky. But what they also do in making those loans is they also typically provide management services and financial support and advice that helps to mitigate the risk of those loans, and it's one of the reasons they're able to do that. So that's just a little bit of background on the jargon of what a community development financial institution or a CDFI is. I've known Dennis for many years. He's been an innovator both in the economic development and the human services field. So it's great to have Dennis here. The next person is Lupe Ruiz. He is our resident entrepreneur for today. Lupe owns Wing Champs, which is a sports bar and restaurant in Raymondville, Texas, which he's built over the past couple of years. So he's going to share his experience and why and how he's built that business. And he's sort of collaborating in that presentation with Inez Polonius. Inez is the CEO of Communities Unlimited, which is a nonprofit that provides a range of community development services in 7 southern states. But among that, they are also a community development financial institution, and they do some really unique and innovative forms of management support to businesses. And so she's been working with Lupe to help him build his business. And then finally, we have Jeffrey Lusk. Jeffrey's the executive director, I'm going to have to read this just to make sure I get it right, of the Hatfield-McCoy Regional Recreation Authority, which is a public corporation that was created by the West Virginia legislature. And its purpose is to promote economic development through entrepreneurship, but they do that by placing a particular focus on the development of the tourism industry and spurring entrepreneurship around tourism. So we're going to go in that order, let them talk a little bit about the work that they've been doing, and then come back to Q&A. So I'm going to start by turning it to Dennis to talk about his work in Northern Michigan.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Good afternoon. So we are based in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is an area that incorporates 15 counties and a little over 300,000 people. So it's not densely populated, and it takes about 7 hours to drive from one end to the other. And we were created by Northern Michigan University, who had an interest in trying to create an economy that helped overcome many of the boom and bust cycles, because the major issues and industries that developed for the UP were timber and mining. And so the timber industry helped build Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit, and the mining industry, copper and iron ore, led to the support for the automobile industry. So we had a lot of extractive industries, but what comes with extractive industries are boom and bust cycles. And what Northern Michigan University wanted to do in 1992 when they created us was to have a way to build a more diverse and resilient Upper Peninsula economy. So as if driving 7 hours wasn't enough, in 2007 we added another 31 Michigan counties and 5 border counties of Wisconsin. So now we can drive 10 hours to get across the whole area. And you say, well, why don't you fly? Well, we can talk about that afterwards because it's literally faster to drive. Still the pulp and paper industry, the timber industry, mining industry are really important for the Upper Peninsula. And at the same time, trying to build a more diverse and resilient economy means supporting entrepreneurs and working with family-owned businesses. So we invest a lot of attention to startups, to helping women-own businesses, working with manufacturers to help them be supported to grow. And when you think about entrepreneurship as an activity, the truth is, if you have 1,000 adults, something like 100 or 150 really have the attitude and aptitude to start a business. Now, all 1,000 have a dream, and we've all thought about that. What if I started, or what if I owned? And most of us shouldn't, and that's part of the ecosystem too, is to help people realize when they shouldn't. But when you think about, if you have 100, 150 who have the attitude and aptitude to start a business, 6 or 7 will be responsible for 80% of the innovation and 80% of the jobs. And so it's really critical to try to think in terms of our kind of work, how do we take that 6 or 7 and turn it into 15 or 20? And that's both a question of how to use capital and how to use knowledge building services to try to help support businesses to not just start, but to be able to grow. There are 6 really critical factors I'd like to highlight. One is, for rural areas, access to broadband is one of the macro issues that still has a lot of work to go. And just think about how people find people nowadays. It's through Yelp and TripAdvisor. So if you're driving into a community and you can't access those pieces of information, you're likely to pass by and not really understand some of the salt of that community, which are the unique family-owned businesses like these guys have put together. Second, the other issue is healthcare. And getting healthcare right is so important. Unfortunately, for many people who have ended up in our portfolio, they've ended up there because they had a medical bankruptcy. And so that's affected their credit. And other people feel like they're stuck with an employer because their family needs health insurance. So getting health care right is a really critical issue for rural communities. And when you think about, go back to the math of 150 or 100, the reality is that many of us have blemishes in our life. We have blemishes because our credit isn't where it could be, that we don't have sufficient collateral, we don't have sufficient cash. We do have character, and we have commitment. And yet when you think about the 5 C's of collateral, if your area doesn't have access to forms of capital like CDFIs provide, and you only have 100 or 150 people who have the attitude and aptitude, you're really crushing the ability of your community to be entrepreneurial if you don't have CDFIs or other ways to develop. So along with broadband and healthcare, it's really important to see that there are in fact other people making money doing things. So Mary Houghton, who was the founder of Shorebank, is on my board. When I first came to Northern Initiatives, I said, Mary, tell me the demographics, tell me the statistics, tell me the predictors of what will make for an entrepreneurial community. She said there's only one thing, are there models? So if someone sees someone else making money, it breaks down the barriers that say, I can't do this, or this is out of reach for me. So models are a critical piece. Along with that, groups like us providing capital and knowledge, support services, become important to not just get people started, but to make sure that they're around in 3, 5, 20 years. So sustainability of the businesses is supported by that kind of activity. And then for the entrepreneurs themselves, the supports to help them get through cash flow in the early days in particular. And when you think about rural areas, the things we face are seasonality. The Marquette, for example, gets 180 inches of snow a year. And other parts of the Upper Peninsula get 300. So for those of you here, that must seem daunting. And in fact, it is. But seasonality is, in fact, an issue that many small businesses are impacted by. And with seasonality becomes distance from markets. And then finally, isolation. How do you take someone who's successful in entrepreneurship and connect them with others? And so that density becomes another issue again. So the entrepreneurship arena right now is being supported by really a market trend toward what's growing, which is our preference, a growing market preference toward local, fresh, natural, and authentic. It's the fact that these small businesses are really the salt, the differentiator of a community that really distinguish what it's like, what it feels like, what it's about to be in a small town. And then finally, we're at a point where for manufacturers in particular, those that survive the recession are now poised to grow. So those become important things that we can help do and support. We get support in trying to bring together, at this point, about $20 million. And that $20 million is coming from the Small Business Administration, USDA, the CDFI Fund, the Office of Community Services within Health and Human Services, and then also the state of Michigan through the Community Development Block Grant Fund, religious organizations, hospitals, and national and community foundations. So we're an aggregator of funds, an aggregator to focus on the development of these particular communities. About 70% of our loans are coming from community banks. So we're doing the loans the banks can't do, won't do, and shouldn't do. And it only fits because they're highly regulated institutions. And so they cannot take the same kind of risks that we can and expect to meet examiner requirements. And then also, associated with that is many banks don't want to do startups, and many banks don't want to do restaurants. And every time we have a loan committee where we approve a restaurant, we say, let's not do any more restaurants until the next loan committee. So an important part of thinking about how we cover this large geographic area with 16 people, 3 full-time lenders. And this year we'll do 100 loans. And so technology and access to broadband is critical for our ability to serve a portfolio of 225 loans, to make 100 loans a year, because we got to do online applications. We have to be able to deliver services using blended learning of giving people access to information and then coaching via webcast or phone or different things. So technology becomes a really important thing. To summarize, we're going to hit 1,000 loans sometime in May or June. If you want to enter that lottery, let me know. And that's going to total about $57 million. So $57,000 loans at a time. So it's a lot of loans over a lot of period of time that begin to add up to something that's actually starting to sound pretty important. And with those loans, we will get to over 20 loans, or we'll get to over $1 million in loans in 20 counties this year. So that's evidence that the model of seeing someone make money and then adding to it is starting to happen in more of our rural communities. In total, that means that there's about 5,000 jobs that have been either retained or created through these kinds of loans that we do. So the story about entrepreneurship is really about individuals and how you promote and grow sectors. And so that's what we'll turn to next in our panel.
Yeah, great. So Lupe is one of these precious entrepreneurs that Dennis talked about, one of those rare folks. So tell us your story about how you got where you are and what you've built.
So my name is Guadalupe Ruiz Jr., and I am one of those 10% that Dennis talks about that shouldn't have open day business. But in all seriousness, I'm from Raymondville, Texas. We are located in Deep South Texas. We are part of Williston County, a beautiful county in Deep South Texas. We serve a population of about 11,000 people. That's how many people are in our community. I am a first-generation American, meaning that my parents were Mexican immigrants, came over to work in the fields. They fell in love, and I'm a product of that love. I joke when I tell my friends that I am made in America with Mexican parts. So growing up all my life, my parents always instilled education to me. They said it's very important that you get educated. We didn't have that opportunity. This is the land of opportunity. We're going to give that opportunity to you. So growing up, that's all I ever knew. I was going to school. Graduated. I went to college, got my degree in nursing. I'm a registered nurse. But I always had that entrepreneurial spirit in me that I knew I wanted to start a business. Working my way up through the ranks in nursing, everywhere I worked, I always ended up in administration, ended up being a supervisor. But there's just something in me that said, you know, I'm helping all these people be successful, and all I ever get is a pat on the back. I knew that I had to do something. I had to take it to that next level. I had to become that person that owned the business. Because my father always instilled in me growing up, no matter what you become, son, be the best at it. He said, if you're going to be a janitor, don't be the guy that just sweeps the floors. Be the guy that tells the janitors what floors to sweep. He said, do all you can to climb to the top. So I knew I wanted to open up a business. I've always been big into reading. I've always read leadership books. I've always read business books because I knew I wanted to open a business. And Business 101 tells you it's all about supply and demand. I knew that in our community, we had that void of a third space. Third space being somewhere where you can, of course, first space being your home, second space being your work. That third space where you go to relax and just unwind. In our community, we have a bunch of fast food restaurants, but there wasn't really anywhere anybody could go to just relax and unwind with the family. So I knew that void was there, so I knew I wanted to do something in that area. Of course, I knew nothing about the restaurant industry. But luckily, I have a beautiful wife who's very supportive of me, who oftentimes believes in me more than I do myself. And she kept pushing me to do it. She goes, you can do this, you can do this, you have these ideas, you're innovative, do it. And I knew that along the way, there's no way I could do it alone. There's just no way I could do it alone. I had to partner up with somebody who had the same vision as me, who had the same beliefs in me, and most important of all, had the same wife like mine that was going to push him. And I believed in him as much as I could. Hence my partnership with my best friend, with my business partner. I tell people often that I have one wife and one husband because I spend more time with him than I do with my wife. He's actually here in the room, Ramiro Ramirez Jr. Ram, you'll say hi, please.
All right.
He is the crazy guy that decided to take the plunge with me. But the important thing that I want to highlight about Ramiro is he's been in the food service industry for over 25 years. He's worked at First Cafeteria, he's worked at Golden Corral, worked his way up to be the food service director at a local federal prison where we live. He manages a kitchen there. So I knew that he had the success that I needed to be able to get in the food service industry. Our partnership is very unique, right? To people, I'm a dreamer, he's a doer. I have these crazy ideas, I'm very innovative. But Ram is the one that brings me back down to reality. He says, hey, Luke, if that's what you want to do, it's going to take XYZ amount of dollars in order for us to do this. You can have this idea, but we're going to do it with your other two ideas. So our partnership is unique where I'm the dreamer and he's the doer. So when we got together, it's funny because we sat down and I actually found a notebook where our first meeting was. His wife and him sat down with me and my wife. And in our notebook, we have where we're going to open this great, magnificent restaurant, where we're going to get a building with about 300 to 400 square feet. We were going to hire 2 employees. Him and his wife were going to invest $25,000. We were going to invest $25,000. So at $50,000, we're going to open this magnificent restaurant, this third space that Rainbow was lacking. Well, I said before you now, $250,000 of an investment, 21 employees later, just a 4,500 square foot facility that we serve our community with some of the fastest internet in the nation. We have a local telephone company, Valley Telephone, who has up to 100 megs of internet speed. We've got faster internet in our small community than downtown Austin, Texas. So that was very important for us. We decided to move forward in this business venture. We've come a long way. We've been successful along the way. Now I can take you into our world, our little restaurant world. We wanted to create a space where a gentleman can go in, watch the game, enjoy an adult beverage with his wife and his children by his side. There's a lot of wing places out there. There's a lot of restaurants, but they're catered more toward the male customers. They're more of a man cave, as we like to call. Our restaurant is very neutral. We've got neutral colors. We've got metal. We've got concrete. Everything is based to make it look like a warehouse look. We didn't put a lot of stuff on the walls because we wanted children and women to feel welcomed as well. So we decided to do that, and before we did that, we actually tried to buy 2 franchises, which I'm not going to name. We tried to buy 2 restaurant franchises, and they came and did an assessment of our facilities, and they said, thank you, but no thank you. Our statistics show that in order to be successful, you must have a population of 25,000 or more. And yet here we are with 11,000 or less wanting to open a restaurant. So we kind of took that as a low blow for a while. We pondered on it and decided, you know what, let's make our own idea. Let's do something different, which is what we did. And we found out to be maybe a market niche. Maybe now we can open these restaurants where the big players won't go, where the big restaurants won't go. And we believe that's been attributed to our success. Luckily, one of the highlights of our story is that we were supported by our local economic development center. The city of Rainbow has an economic development center that was giving USDA funds out, grants and loans. So our $50,000 turned into $250,000, being able to make it successful to open this restaurant. Without their help, there's no way we could have done it. So these funds are very important to entrepreneurs such as ourselves. With that being said, we were able to move forward, open this restaurant. Our first year in operation, we made a little bit over $750,000 in a community of 11,000 people. Yes. Again, I think we found a market niche where we're able to tap into that a lot of other people haven't been able to tap into, which is the family environment in the rural communities that are out there. I appreciate your applause, but let me tell you, there's been a lot of sacrifices along the road. My partner and I and our wives, we still hold full-time jobs. We still work 40 hours a week and then come run a restaurant in the evenings. With that being said, we had many pitfalls along the way. We made some mistakes. We've learned, we've evolved. We've matured a lot as business owners because we were not business owners in the beginning. We didn't know what it took to run a business. We were pretty much given the funds and says, go open your restaurant, which is what we did. And we made some mistakes along the way. And I'll be honest with you, there was a point when we were about 3 days away from throwing in the towel. We were just ready to quit. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to do it, to where we were done. We were done. We were ready to close our doors. Hence the introduction of Communities Unlimited. Communities Unlimited was introduced to us. They were able to give us that education that we were lacking, the business knowledge that we were lacking. They provided us with a cash flow tool. I want to say that we attribute us still being open today to God, number one. Number two, to Sergio, Vonisha, and of course Ines here. Believing in us at a point when we didn't believe in ourselves. Believing in us and encouraging us and lifting out that hand to pick us up when we were down. To give us just that knowledge and that technical training that we didn't have. So because of them, we're able to use this cash flow tool, manage our funds, rearrange our budget, just make some changes that were very, very intricate in us still being open today. So that's been one of our success stories. I think one of the things that I want to highlight on is in Rainbow, we're known for 3 things. We're known for farming, we're known for ranching, and we're known for our prisons. We've got a total of 4 prisons in our community. We've got 2 federal prisons, a state prison, and of course the county prison. We opened July 22nd of 2015. In March of 2015, after we were about 3/4 of the way in construction, one of our federal prisons closed, losing right under 500 jobs. Come January 2016, one of our other biggest employers, which is the Walmart, they closed, losing another 150 jobs. We were able to create 21 jobs and actually hire some of those displaced workers. Jobs that were intricate to our community. We were putting food on the table for families that had no other way to provide for their family at the time. So though the jobs were small, and though they were a small amount compared to the over 500 jobs we lost, we believe we made a difference in some families. In the future, we plan on franchising this. We'd like to eventually, our business plan calls for us to open 5 restaurants in the next 5 years. At that point, we'll either be very, very busy, more than we are now, or we'll be able to start setting franchises. So that, I guess in a nutshell, is just a little story about Wing Champs and where we're at.
That's awesome. So I'm going to go to Inez in a sec, but you forgot to do your shout out.
Oh, yes. Big shout out to everybody back at Wing Champs in Rainbow and Williamson County. We love you guys. Thank you for your support, because without you, there is no Wing Champs. So thank you guys.
Because they have such great broadband, there's a group of folks who are watching us today from Wing Champs. So we wanted to do a shout out. Okay, so Inez, you and your group, tell us about the Communities Unlimited story. We've gotten a snapshot of the work that you do, but tell us the big picture as well.
All right. We are headquartered in the great state of Arkansas, but our footprint really goes from Texas all the way to Tennessee. That covers 60% of what the federal government designates as persistently poor counties. Those are counties where the poverty rate is above 20% and has been for 30 years. So these are areas like the Mississippi and Arkansas Delta, the Black Belt, the tribal lands in Oklahoma, and the Rio Grande Valley, where Raymondville is and Wing Champs are. In these places, new job creation is coming from the local economy and from the local entrepreneurs that are willing to take a risk, make the investment, and create the jobs. And so I wanted to spend a minute really talking about what that local ownership really means. The data's out that $1 that Lupe earns is going to circulate in his community 6 or 7 times before it leaves. It's very different than a corporate partner who might create a lot more jobs, but 95% of their profits are going to leave that community quickly. The second piece is that, especially with the restaurants and the retailers, these are local entrepreneurs that provide significant sales tax dollars to communities that often struggle to provide basic services, police, fire, you can name a few more. Finally, these local entrepreneurs meet their workforce where they are. We all dream about the big tech businesses in rural, but the reality is that our workforce isn't there yet. And yes, we need to do a lot of training, but what's also important is that these jobs come along that folks can access and be successful in and build careers in, just like Ram did, and you have also. So how does Communities Unlimited look at economic development? So we take a very holistic approach. And I'll start focusing on 4 areas in which we work around this issue of economic development. The first that might surprise you is we're part of the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, and there's a couple of folks here that are also members of that really look at infrastructure, water and wastewater in particular, to enable economic development. It is really hard to start a new business if you have to build your own septic tank, especially a restaurant. The second is working in communities like Raymondville to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which is exactly why we are in Raymondville, because you have a mayor, you have a city manager that understand the importance of local entrepreneurship. And they're going to dedicate their Economic Development Commission to helping folks like Ram and Lupe start a business, that access rural business development dollars from USDA to fund their own local community loan fund, and then bring us in to provide that technical assistance. So we do a lot of that grassroots leadership building to help communities figure out these strategies. The third piece is that intensive managerial assistance that Lupe referenced, and I'll talk a little bit more here in a second. The fourth piece is our community development financial institution, which really provides the capital in every one of these areas of our work. And we are at about 14 million in assets with a wide range of investors, both private sector, public, USDA, SBA, that really make up that infrastructure for us. So circling back to that managerial assistance, we provide intensive assistance usually on the front end of the loans we make. We have developed 40 basically management tools that are easily accessible and that are cheap to implement, and that we actually help folks use, like the cash flow tool, which we designed so that entrepreneurs can really understand their cash flow across a week, across a month, and then looking out and really planning those loan payments, the tax payments, and all the things that often trip folks up. So what's a little bit unique is we grow existing businesses, we turn businesses around, because saving a job is a lot cheaper than creating a new one. We also transition businesses from one generation to the next, especially if the children are no longer in the community, so that we maintain that asset and those jobs in that community. And then finally, we work with a lot of entrepreneurs who want to get started and really help them test the feasibility of their idea in their community before they invest a lot of resources in that. So what's a little bit unique is how we manage our capital, because we use that managerial assistance on the front end to manage our risk. That allows us to make much riskier loans than any community bank, and quite frankly, most of your larger CDFIs also, because we oftentimes, even if we can access collateral, it isn't worth a whole lot on the back end. And quite frankly, if that's what we're waiting for, then the entrepreneur's already failed and we failed. So we're really looking at that co-investment through our managerial assistance in our capital to make sure that businesses are successful. The last piece is, in 2014, our territory expanded from 2 states to 7 states. And so we do a lot of that same intensive managerial assistance virtually, using Skype, GoToMeeting, QuickBooks Online, to be able to interact with clients that are distance-wise very far away from us. And we've even closed a couple of loans virtually. It's real money, but the loan closing was virtual. So the key here is that these are strategies that work because the entrepreneurial fiber is there. Folks like Ram and Lupe who are ready to take a risk, and we have a lot of deep culture in that. From a farming environment, people know how to take risk. And so when you look at the 246 entrepreneurs that we worked with last year, they generated $10 million in economic impact. That is circulating now in communities to generate $70 million in impact. And so tying the managerial assistance with the capital is really what makes our equation work.
Great, thank you. That's terrific. So now we're going to go to Jeffrey. Yeah. And Jeffrey, you've taken a little bit of a different approach in the work that you've done, because you're looking to promote entrepreneurship, but you've really done it by trying to build a whole new sector, or really expand a sector, which is the tourism sector. So tell us about that.
Sure, and I'm going to do my shout out on the on the front end, so I don't forget. My girlfriend, Julie Marino, is actually streaming this. She's a talented and gifted instructor at Hurricane Middle School, and they're streaming it in Hurricane Middle School today. So I want to give a shout out to her. So, as she said, we are located in, you mentioned our sector of tourism. We are located in southern West Virginia. I'll give you a little bit about southern West Virginia. When the 2010 census came out, the area that I'm from, if you looked at the 50 counties out of the 5,000 in the country that had the highest percentage of outward migration, 4 of those counties butted right up against each other in southern West Virginia. Those are 4 of the 9 counties that we serve. So we do have some challenges, and our project is using tourism to diversify our economy in southern West Virginia. And I'm going to go back and give you a little history. 20 years ago, 5 economic development directors, myself being one of them, in 4 of these counties we talked about, got together and decided that we needed to diversify our economy. Now, we're in southern Appalachia, the heart of the coal fields, timber, natural gas extraction, coal extraction. Those were the drivers of our economy. We have been losing these jobs since the 1950s. It's not, we talk about coal going down now, but really since the 1950s, it's required less and less people to mine coal. 20 years ago, it really came to a peak as our populations in some of our communities were half of what they were in the 1950s. Our 5 EDAs got together and looked around to see what could we do in our economy to diversify our economy. And there's a lot of challenges. We don't have a lot of 4-lane highways coming into our area. We have very little flat developable property. What we did have was an asset. which were our mountains. As I said, we're in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Beautiful country, amazing vistas, forest. It's just a great place to be. We take it a little bit for granted because we've lived there our whole lives, but folks from the outside love these mountains. But we had to find a reason to bring them there. And as we looked around, a local activity in our area was ATV riding. When I talk about an ATV, it's an all-terrain vehicle, and you call them four-wheelers, and there are these UTVs, which are these side-by-side vehicles, and off-road motorcycles, and dirt bikes, and Humvees, and Jeeps, and all these off-road vehicles. And we have literally thousands, tens of thousands of miles of roads cut through our mountains that were cut there by the extractive industry. These are roads that existed and have existed for 30, 40, 50, 100 years. And they're there to do coal extraction, timber extraction, and they're left behind as a byproduct. And these roads, our local individuals were getting on these roads and riding their ATVs. So our thought was, what can we do to create an economy where folks would want to come from the outside and do this sport that all of our people say so great. When we talked to our people, said, oh, we have the best trails in the country. So our 5 EDAs partnered with the Motorcycle Industry Council here in Washington, D.C., the West Virginia Recreational Vehicle Association, and these groups represent the manufacturers. Those folks put up funding for us to begin to develop this project. And our project was basically this. We wanted to build a tourism infrastructure where folks from outside of our area could come into our area, bring their ATVs or UTVs, or rent an ATV or UTV, stay and ride our trails. But that's a tall order from where we were at, because in southern West Virginia, we don't have a lot of public lands. When you look at our property and our land ownership, most of our counties have 90 to 95% private ownership. And it's private ownership held by a very few number of companies. It's coal companies, it's timber companies, it's natural gas companies. So it's not really individuals, it's these companies, and they hold it for that purpose. They hold it for the purpose of doing natural resource extraction. So we went to our state legislature in 1996 and said, you know, is it possible that we could create a public corporation, that's what we are, an instrumentality of government, to manage trails, recreational trails, on private property in southern West Virginia? And it seems like an odd concept. Why would these land companies do that? We went to the land companies and said, we're going to create this public corporation. We want to manage this activity that already goes on your property. It's, you know, millions of acres that you can't keep closed off. We're going to provide you insurance. We're going to provide you management services. We're going to provide you law enforcement. In turn, you're going to allow us to bring visitors in from outside of our area to visit and and ride our trails. So snapshot forward to 4 years, we worked with the land companies, we worked with the legislature, we created the public corporation, we opened our first 300 miles of trail on 4 land companies and about 50,000 acres. Immediately we realized the largest challenge we had. We had opened up a tourist attraction in a place with communities and towns that had no lodging. They had very few restaurants. We're inviting all these guests to come. We're inviting company to come. We don't have this piece of infrastructure, this critical piece of infrastructure. That's when we realized our biggest challenge of being in a rural area is when you do bring tourism to a place where it doesn't normally exist, say the town of Gilbert, where they have 1 motel with 15 beds, and that was over capacity when we opened. It's hard to build off of that. So we started our work with entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs, because we're not a good place for the Holiday Inn Express or the Best Western to come and make that investment. Our EDAs, along with our Hatfield-McCoy Trail Authority, began to reach out to folks to make investments, to provide a place for our trails, provide a place for our riders to come into. As we move forward in this process, it has been wildly successful. What we've saw in our communities since our inception is the investment of over 60 new businesses. These businesses, 40 of them are lodging providers, 20 of them are restaurants, ATV rentals, kayak rentals. These companies have made investments, and they're all local entrepreneurs into our area to create an infrastructure for us to bring tourists here. Last year, we brought 39,352 riders to southern West Virginia. Wow. 83% of those riders were non-West Virginia residents. So it is truly a tourist economy. When you look backwards at our economy, for 100 years, our economy has been driven by coal mining, by timber extraction, by natural gas drilling. Our communities have been supported by this. We have lost tens of thousands of jobs in southern West Virginia. We have to diversify to change that economy. We are doing that. Right now, there are 230 plus jobs directly associated with the trails. There's over 50 jobs at our agency, building, maintaining, doing the law enforcement on the trails. And one of the things that we're looking at in the future is how do we grow this? Because we have a unique problem. You mentioned, Lupe, the supply-demand curve. Well, our supply-demand curve's out of whack. We have far more people on a given weekend that want to come and visit us in southern West Virginia than we have rooms to put them in, and beds to stick them in. So with that, we started a new approach 3 years ago. Our agency did, because still in southern West Virginia, our local economic development agencies, although we've been wildly successful, still have a pretty good focus on industrial recruitment and retention, which is great, and we need to diversify, because we've got machine shops and companies that need to diversify to find new outlets. But we need entrepreneurs also with the trail system. We need entrepreneurs to step up. So we partnered with the Natural Capital Investment Fund, which is a CDFI, which I have nothing but superlatives to say about them, to try to bring $10 million worth of investment capital to southern West Virginia. They've placed a loan officer in our office. We have worked with the Appalachian Regional Commission, which we were just very blessed 2 years ago to start working with ARC. Then the POWER program came along. We were one of the POWER grant recipients. We're using that money now to do business coaching in our office, to do small business training. We partnered with a local community college to develop the infrastructure, because my entrepreneurs are not like the typical entrepreneur in this country. When I look at the businesses, the 60 businesses that have opened in our community supporting the trail system, 80% of those business owners have never owned a business. So my entrepreneurs are first-time entrepreneurs. When I look at the businesses they're in, and I get rid of the 3 branded lodging properties, none of them have been in the business that they went into. So these are not generational folks. These aren't folks that have owned a restaurant before, that have owned a lodge before. 80% of my folks have never owned a business. 100% of them have never been in the business they're in today. And that's a really unique group, and it's not your typical entrepreneur. I don't have that 18 to 30-year-old entrepreneur. My entrepreneur is an out-of-work coal miner, an out-of-work gas worker, a housewife, an individual that is recently retired or had to take early retirement, that wants to build a business for themselves. And the jobs they're creating are actually the jobs to sustain their family. Oftentimes they own their homes in our community. Their families have been in our community through multiple generations. They don't want to leave, but there's a limited amount of opportunities for them in our community. What we're providing and what we're doing is setting a table by saying we're the public corporation. We're going to build, maintain, market, do the law enforcement on these trails. In turn, we're going to get out of your way, and we're going to let you open up businesses to provide lodging for these folks. We're going to let you open up your businesses to rent them kayaks, to rent them ATVs, and open restaurants. And I think that's the biggest thing we do, is get out of the entrepreneur's way. As we work, we don't do anything that the entrepreneur could do. So when we identify a need in our community, the first thing we do is say, it's not our public corporation's job to do that. Is there a way an entrepreneur can do that and make money? And if there is, then we reach out to those folks. The biggest hurdle our folks see, of course, is never being in business, is that coaching aspect. What you provide so eloquently and talked about is that coaching aspect, that aspect where you bring the entrepreneur in, and there is a lot of hand-holding. You know, you work with them from the day they walk through your door to the day they get funded, to 2 years later when they do the expansion, to 10 years later when they want to hand it over to the next generation. It's a lifelong commitment with these folks, and we view ourselves as partners. I tell every business that opens up on our trail, you're my partner. We could not run the most successful all-terrain vehicle trail system in the eastern U.S. if we didn't have your investments. If I didn't have a place for people to stay, then I couldn't bring businesses to southern West Virginia. If we didn't have a trail system, then you couldn't have those customers in your business. So we are truly, truly partners. And you know, one of the things I like to say about our land companies, they stepped up, and these are coal, oil, gas, timber companies. They provide us right now over 250,000 acres of property to put our trail system on. We do not pay them a penny. We provide them law enforcement, we provide them management services, we provide them some insurance, but we don't pay them a penny. That resource is valued in the billions. If you looked at it, that property has the value in the billions. They allow the public sector to use it for no fees, no remuneration. We do a little bit of management on it. We actually, I think, have created one of the safest trail systems in the country. But the thing that gets me is that they provide that at no cost, and because they provide that at no cost, we're able to set the table for these 60-plus entrepreneurs to develop their businesses. So, thank you.
So I want to underscore a few things that you've all across this sort of mentioned about being really critical in terms of promoting entrepreneurship in these rural communities. So one of them is clearly capital and access to really flexible capital and capital that is willing to look at deals that sort of traditional banks won't look at. The second is that pairing that capital with management assistance that really helps people build their ability to grow and manage that business, particularly if they're in an industry that they haven't been in before, really, really critical. A third piece that I hear is infrastructure. So Dennis, you talked about broadband. Inez, you talked about the role of septic and other kinds of infrastructure in addition to broadband. Jeffrey, you've built infrastructure. You've built these trails, which is the what your businesses are built on. So really important in rural areas. So those to be seen to be some interesting themes. And what I want to unpack a little bit is, as someone who works in entrepreneurship in rural and urban areas, those first two things that we talked about, capital and management, I think are what you hear about any entrepreneur. It's what you hear with organizations that work with urban entrepreneurs. It's what you see in the literature of folks who survey entrepreneurs nationally. So let's talk a little bit more about what's really different about running a business in a rural area and about working with entrepreneurs in a rural area. So I'm going to start with Inez because I know you have some thoughts on this, but we'll open it up some more. So Inez?
So one critical issue in our communities is the loss of community banks. A lot of those banks have been consolidated and then closed. So we've lost a referral source, but also our entrepreneurs. You know, most entrepreneurs who want to go into business, the first thing they think of is, I'm going to talk to my banker. And that's usually not the right person for them to talk to, but that's where they go anyways. And so we've lost that piece of infrastructure. I think the second piece is, in rural, because the population is less dense, your market is less dense. And so you have to become and create much more creative business models to be able to make that business sustainable. And that's really where we help a lot of people test the feasibility of their idea so that they have something that they're very good at and they want to go sell that. And then we come back and say, well, can you also do this? Can you also sell on the internet? Can you begin to market to the region instead of just this community, so that we make sure that they have a viable business from the day they get started?
Dennis, you want to add anything to that about what's different about your entrepreneurs who you work with? And you work in some urban areas as well, do you?
Not at this point.
Oh, okay,
I mean,
okay.
Marquette's the largest city at 20,000.
Oh, okay, so.
So it would be pretty unlikely to run into Boston Consulting Group or Deloitte & Touche trying to find clients in our area. You might, but it's pretty unlikely. So particularly the ability to work in both building our capacity, so things like working with LISC in the Section 4 program helps invest in us to do things like to be able to build a portal for our customers to be able to use to get them highly valued information. We're part of the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center program and the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So that gives us resources that we can go out and work with manufacturers to help them to focus on how do they improve their delivery times, how do they improve their quality, how do they lower their costs. And all of those are really critical. When you think about the places that we are, it's pretty typical that our manufacturers are going to be 10 to 20, 25 people. And those are probably going to be the most important jobs in that community in terms of wages and benefits and investment. So they're the ones that are supporting the basketball team and the hockey team, the Little League team. So those connections of trying to make sure that family-owned businesses are strong and growing is really important, not just for some of our larger communities, but also our smallest communities. And having ways to access resources and capital to support that is a little more difficult than the lending side. The lending side, our cost of funds is 1.6%. We're trying to maintain a 5% spread. So it becomes really easy to go talk to government or foundations and say, we would really love 1% money. And everybody gets that. The knowledge building activities are a lot more challenging in finding resources. And so, you know, if you're going to think about the whole infrastructure, the collaborations that occur in rural areas, we need the small business development centers. We need the SCORE chapters. We need the universities, and particularly Northern Michigan University, continuing to invest in resources to support small business and entrepreneurship. So there's a lot of collaboration that must go on if we're going to create this kind of an infrastructure to support small businesses.
I just want to make a couple points. One thing, just to talk about, you've really talked eloquently, you made that point again about pairing capital and management assistance. And sometimes one of the reasons entrepreneurs need capital is because of management challenges. And so sometimes the best thing you can do for them is help them understand how to better manage their cash flow so they don't need to borrow as much capital. So I think that's really an important point I just want to make as you're talking about dealing with some of these younger businesses. The other thing I just want to point out is that we've talked a lot about creating new businesses, but I know that in many cases, and as in Dennis, you're also looking at issues of how do we preserve existing businesses and how do we help transition business ownership from one generation to the next, or make sure that businesses don't close because the owner is retiring. So I just want to point that out because there's a lot of richness there. Lupe, I wanted you to talk a little bit, two things on this point. One is, you're one of those entrepreneurs who figured out the business model that works when the larger franchisees wouldn't. So what's different about how you approach your restaurant and your business model than what they would have done if they had, and secondly, talk a little bit more about the ways that you reinvest in your community and have thought about what you do in the local economy.
Right. Well, I'd like to touch on what we were talking about earlier as far as the ecosystem in our community. We received money from the city, from the local EDC, which was money given to them from the USDA. When we received those funds from the city, my partner and I felt obligated to reinvest that money. What do I mean by that? We could have easily, we purchased about $60,000 worth of lumber to do all our remodeling. We could have easily driven 30, 45 miles on the road to the local Lowe's or Home Depot. And they would have given us a great price on lumber, spending that amount of money, and they would have delivered it to our front door. But we felt obligated that because the city gave us that money, we had to reinvest that money back in the local economy. So we decided to purchase our lumber from a local lumberyard. Though it was a bit more expensive, though it was not the price that the big chains would have given us, that local lumberyard has about 15, 20 employees that we knew were going to come eat at a restaurant eventually, or they were going to eat at other local restaurants, as well as our contractors. Our electrician was local. He's a local man, business owner from our community, born and raised in our community. He's got about 6 or 7 employees, which we knew he was going to take that money and do his payroll with. Our plumbers, our sheetrock guys, our finishers, our painters. We tried to hire local or reinvest that money locally as much as we could. Now, there was some things we couldn't do because we're such a small town. We don't have a restaurant supplier, so obviously we had to buy our equipment out of the community. But every dollar that we could spend locally, we spent locally. That was not part, any of the stipulations of our contract or of our loan or our grant that we received, but we just felt obligated because we were receiving the local funds. We felt obligated to reinvest those local funds. And I think that leads maybe into the next part of the question about the difference of our restaurant from a chain. Because we know our community, because we're born and raised there, we feel that we understand our community. So because of that, we've been able to make certain adjustments on our menu and our offerings to the community that local chains, the other chains probably would have frowned upon. I'll give you a great example. We're a wing place. Our staple item is chicken wings. We do have burgers and stuff like other places, but about 2 months ago, we decided to offer chips and salsa. Now you're thinking, what does that have to do with a wing place? But we have so many people say, hey man, I'm not really hungry. I'm here to have an adult beverage and watch the game, but I want to nibble on something. Do you have some chips and salsa? And we're like, chips and salsa, who would want that? So one day, it was actually my partner's wife's idea. She says, just go to the local tortilla store, buy some tortillas, quarter them, drop them in the deep fryer, which we already had, fry them in the oil, which we already had, serve them up in the bowls that we already had, and let's try it. Well, I'll tell you that to this day, as of right now, our chips and salsa has our highest profit margin. It's probably our biggest seller. Now, if you would go if we would have had a franchise, we'd have to call corporate, get permission. They'd have to go before the board and ask for permission to allow us to do that. But because we know our community and the demographics, we were able to make that change on the fly. We were selling chips and salsa from one day to the next. Another funny story, on Monday night, we were at the restaurant, and we had people come in to ask us, because it's a homemade salsa, it's actually my mom's recipe, but we make it at the restaurant. We had people telling us, we love this stuff. Can I buy this by the cup to take home? We're like, okay, sure. So we started selling the little 4-ounce cups for 50 cents, whatever the case, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we were selling to them, and guys are like, are you serious? This isn't enough. Give me like 10 of these. And again, his wife had the idea, says, you know what? Let's put that salsa in a 20-ounce cup and sell it. And she just pulled a number out of her head, and the guy's like, are you serious? I was willing to pay more. So now we're selling chips and salsa by the 20-ounce cup. And that opened our idea on our flight up here. My partner and I were actually talking about, you know what? Maybe we can start bottling this stuff and sell it at the front counter. And now, again, that goes back to evolving as a business, maturing as a business, and making changes on the fly, whereas if we were a franchise, we wouldn't be able to do it.
It's terrific. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis.
Just to think about franchises for a minute, what they do for people are they give you systems. And so you work in a routine and a system that's all provided for you, and that's great. That's great because a lot of our startups start up without systems. And so the knowledge building services are really attuned to making sure that they build great systems so that they can be competitive. And the opportunity now is the market demand keeps growing for local, fresh, natural, and authentic. And so when folks like Lupe can get started, it is a question of their survivability is about how well they're going to do in terms of building systems so that they can be attuned to profitability and get to the point where they understand their most important financial statements, their balance sheet, because that's telling them if they're creating wealth.
Terrific. So thank you. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit is how hard is it to convince the policymakers and the local government officials that are important to you at the state and local level that they should be focusing on entrepreneurship. So Jeffrey, I'm going to go to you because I know this is an issue.
Yeah, this is an issue. When we first started, and this continues, and it's today. It's ironic. Yesterday, I met with our secretary, or the day before yesterday, I met with our Secretary of Commerce. He actually invited me to Charleston to talk about what we were doing because so many folks were talking about how successful we were being in working at the local level. But when we first started, entrepreneurship 20 years ago was a little bit of a new concept. Folks considered it small business, and even our small business development center. So what we've had a challenge doing, and it's not really a problem so much at the local level, as Lupe said, the mayors get it because they see the Main Street, the city managers get it. But the folks that it's really hard to convince is when you get to the state level, they're so focused on the industrial recruitment and retaining those larger employees or employers. And in our instance, it's the coal industry or the timber industry. So it's been a challenge, but it's getting a lot better. One of the things is that at the national level, there's been a much better focus. The foundation community has funded a lot of entrepreneurial initiatives in our area that's helped bring this to light. And success stories like yours, success stories like we're doing. And we do economic impact studies that we actually hand back out to say, this is what entrepreneurship's doing in your community. Our last one was 2014, showed that we have $22 million in direct spending and 232 employees and 60 businesses associated with our trail system. That's really what you have to hand to the policymakers. You have to push that across the table, and things like the business coaching, it's an investment. We mentioned we received funding to do business coaching. People have to look at that as an investment. When you look at something like that, we have to convince folks this is an investment. We're investments in coaching so that these people will open up a business. That's no different than investing into an industrial park or a water line or a sewer line.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Thank you. So you also mentioned philanthropy as being a key part. And can we talk a little bit, from those of you who are running these organizations, what the role of philanthropy has been? And what that does for you in terms of the kinds of things it funds at your organizations. Does it leverage other money? How important is that? Anyone want to jump in? Inez, you want to?
So I think very critically, the space of providing that managerial assistance requires that philanthropic investment. But philanthropic investment is also a great tool to leverage federal dollars, which all require match funding. And for most rural organizations, it's really difficult to compete because we don't have the heavy philanthropic investment to be able to then leverage that whether that's the CDFI or SBA or any of those other programs.
So speaking on our end with us and saying we applied for and were successful in getting an Appalachian Regional Commission grant. However, there is a match requirement. We don't have an extra $150,000 at our agency to do that. If it wasn't for the role of foundations, we couldn't meet that statutory required match to be able to have a business coaching program or a lending program. So oftentimes the foundations are filling that gap that there's really nowhere else to go. There's not a public entity that can do it, and if it were not for the foundations, many of us would not be able to provide the services we do.
Well, for us, the Kellogg Foundation that invests in family security has been a really important partner for us to be able to go into first Lower Michigan. And then when the SBA Community Advantage Program came out a couple of years ago, they did a program-related investment with us so that we would have the capital to be able to invest in these 7A loan guarantees offered by SBA that then we can sell and then bring that capital back to be able to continue to evolve it. More recently, we've been working with local community foundations as supporters of capital for our work. So the Fremont Area Community Foundation and the community foundations of the Upper Peninsula have both been investors in helping us to have capital to loan, particularly for the areas where their interests lie.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So for those of you who have questions, get ready. So my last question is, we've been talking about rural areas. We're sitting here in Washington, D.C. You all have mentioned a lot of letters, ARC, SBA, CDFI, USDA. How important is what the federal government does? And particularly reflecting on the fact that the budget came out yesterday, what do you need and what are you concerned about? So who wants to take the first shot at that?
Well, 70% of our funding has historically come from federal resources. So we can take you through a very complete alphabet of possibilities associated with federal resources. But certainly what was put out yesterday was not a warm and fuzzy moment to think about what its impact would be directly for an organization like us. But then there's also a lot of indirect pieces that pieces that don't affect us will affect the infrastructure that is so important for different pieces. So for example, if EDA goes away, that's going to really hurt the planning commissions. The planning commissions are the ones that are providing resources and grant support for the small towns that can't afford a grant writer, that has a city manager at best that has to do that kind of work as a corner of a desk. So there are amazing implications associated with what came out yesterday, that there wasn't really a lot that seemed to be saying, rural, we're behind you. There just wasn't.
I think for us at Wing Champs, not being able to have that funding from the USDA would have been detrimental. There's no way we could have done our business without the help of the USDA. It's hard to imagine how any other entrepreneur can make it without, in the rural area, can make it without those kind of funds like we did. I mean, we wouldn't be here sitting today if it wasn't for that kind of those grants and those funds from the USDA. We'd be another idea blown away in the wind.
So we've got 47 people on the ground from Texas to Tennessee, and 60% of the budget comes from federal funds to be able to do that. And that is across the alphabet soup as well. But the rural business piece of it and the Rural Business Development Grant is absolutely essential, both at the community level to build those loan funds, but also at our level to be able to provide technical assistance. So with a $90,000 investment, we work with and get ready for funding 50 businesses that last year created about 60 jobs. So the return on investment on some of these programs are very strong.
I guess mine will go two ways. First, at the agency I work, there's not a single mile of trail that was built on our trail system that was not initially funded in whole or in part by the Federal Recreational Trails Program, which is a set aside out of federal highways. But as an economic developer who's done economic development in southern West Virginia for 23 years, to my knowledge, I don't know of a water line, a sewer line, or a 4-lane highway in southern West Virginia that didn't have either ARC, Appalachian Regional Commission, USDA, or federal EDA money in it. So in my knowledge, in 23 years, I don't know of a single water, sewer line, or divided highway that didn't include those fundings, and I don't know any of them that could have happened without that portion of the funding.
So all of those pieces, infrastructure, capital, management resources, really challenging to think about how the budget supports that. All right, open for questions. Folks, raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. Yes, Janet?
Remind everyone that hashtag rural innovation, if you want to send a question in, use hashtag rural innovation.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So did folks,
All right.
did folks listen?
Someone raise your hand and here's one.
Okay. I guess it's to Jeffrey.
Yes.
The new entrepreneurs in southern West Virginia, the question I have is, does part of your training include cultural sensitivity? I mean, where I'm going is a few years ago, my wife and I went to a wonderful place up in West Virginia that we love with my mother-in-law, but one of the ends had a flag that appeared to be a Confederate flag outside, and she would refuse to get out of the car. So help me out a little bit. Make sure, are you welcoming to everybody?
Absolutely, we are welcoming to everybody, and what you talk about is a cultural thing, and you still see those as you drive throughout southern West Virginia. So I'm sure if you made that trip today through southern West Virginia, you'd see some of those. But we are very sensitive. We're actually a public agency, and that makes it kind of nice because everyone feels welcome coming through our front door, and our services are opened up to everyone. And McDowell County, which is one of our service counties and one of the most impoverished counties in the country, has a very high minority population, and we're trying to work with them because that's your folks on the ground. Those are the people who are going to stay there and make that investment. You can't bring in an outside person to make an investment in McDowell County. You've got to go to those people in that community and have them make that investment. But what you're speaking of is a cultural problem that, at least in southern West Virginia, to some extent, you still see that. But our agency, we work with absolutely everyone, and we're a public agency, so I think everyone feels comfortable walking through our front door, and services are also available to absolutely everyone.
Joyce, we have a question that came in from our hashtag. Do you have the broadband you need? And if so, how did you get it?
I know Lupe.
Yeah, we've got. Yeah, we're lucky that we have a telephone cooperative in Rainbow where we live called Valley Telephone Cooperative, and they, through grants that they've received over the years, they've been able to build an internet infrastructure where we've got fiber optics coming to homes in Raymondville. When I'm telling you that we have faster speed in Raymondville than they do in downtown Austin, by the Capitol, I'm not lying. We've got close to 100 megs, going into homes, going into businesses like ours. And one thing that's unique about our restaurant, when I talk about having that third space, our internet is so fast, and we have so many access points that we actually have kids come hang out at our restaurant after school to come do their homework. Now you got to understand, our population is unique, where 85 to 90% of our population doesn't have a college degree or a college education. So many of these people can't afford that internet. Even though we have it, they can't afford it in their homes. So us offering it free to them, it's a double-edged sword. One, we serve our community. We allow them to have the internet access they don't have at home. And two, they come to us, and even if they just buy a drink, once they buy a drink, then they buy an appetizer. After the appetizer comes a meal. So everybody benefits from it. So because of that, I think that internet speed that we do have has been beneficial to us as a business.
Great.
We were fortunate to have 3 universities in the Upper Peninsula, and so they accelerated access to broadband. And Northern Michigan University has worked to extend, and worked with the FCC now, to extend and help us to be able to do more with educationally supported broadband. So they may be part of our solution for the last mile, which is constantly still an issue. And 10 years ago, it used to be quaint to say, oh, you can come to the UP and you can't get phone reception, you can disconnect. It's no longer quaint. It's a big, big problem. So getting those last miles finished and continuing to cover in more parts of rural Michigan is hugely important.
And in most of our footprint, it's a huge issue. And as we're expanding to provide these services more virtually, we're running into that all the time. And so we have a lot of work left to be done in the South.
Southern West Virginia, where I'm at, it is an ongoing challenge. Even our corporate office has trouble getting reliable broadband. In fact, there's not a 2-week period goes by that we're not calling our provider saying, hey, we're down, our internet's down for the day. But our areas, it's just not been a priority, and the investments have not been made. And because we have a declining population, I'm not sure the investments are going to be made.
We have a question here, and then I see you over there. Oh, sorry, someone back here has the mic, but then these 2 folks. Okay, great.
I got you because I've got the mic. I don't think I need the mic. Thanks. My name's Todd Borgasani, and I work with Pittsco Education. And 45 years ago, we were founded by a rural entrepreneur. He was an industrial arts teacher. And he believed that students of all ages, elementary, middle, and high school, needed to have hands-on experiential education. Pittsco started as a catalog company, and about 20 years later became a company that went into formal classroom education, hands-on learning again. My question is, are you familiar with the maker movement, maker spaces, and maker education? Because what I found as an entrepreneur myself was one of the most important things for me was to learn how to build stuff. Now, growing up in rural Indiana, all Dad's neighbors had basically metal shops, wood shops, car shops in their garages. But here I'm an urbanite in DC and try to find somebody who can even assemble IKEA furniture. So we're really losing that, build it yourself mentality. And I think that's what we have in rural America. That, hey, look, we can figure out how to build it, but it's you guys that are instrumental in creating those systems today. So what we do is in K through 12, we install maker spaces in libraries, public and school, and basically engage in maker education so that the Lupes of tomorrow basically can launch that restaurant and basically distribute the chips and salsa to the world.
That's right.
See you, brother.
Great. So maker spaces, how is that playing out?
We're seeing some of it, and another pre-piece to that is something that Northern Michigan University started a couple of years ago, which is called Invent at NMU. And what they're doing is they're using students to help people to look at an idea that they may have, which may not be much more than something on a napkin, and to test that idea against what's out there. So that what it's doing is it's helping someone who may believe that they've got a great idea that's going to make them millions of dollars to immediately understand, are there patents out there that may prohibit their making it? Are there other products out there, and how are they priced? What does Alibaba say about the product? What does eBay say about it? What does Amazon say about it? So it's for a nominal investment, it's helping people to run through many ideas and fail fast. And failing fast is probably as important a dimension of the entrepreneurship experience as anything.
Great.
We have a very successful entrepreneurship hub that has a makerspace in Little Rock, and so that's run through one of our partners. And as we're building these ecosystems in rural places, that is a piece of our equation that we're always trying to figure out, how do we right-size a makerspace that makes sense for the youth in that community. But it's a really important piece of the overall equation. So thank you.
That hub and spoke system off of Little Rock, you're right.
In Southern West Virginia, and it's not something we directly do, but we have the Robert C. Byrd Institute of Flexible Manufacturing. They actually have a very robust program that allows entrepreneurs, individuals that have created products or wish to create a product, to come in not only to their fixed space, but to help them outfit and equip their spaces to create those items and to do things like the copywriting and the trademarking and the testing and the certification. So it's a very good institute, and it's regional to our area. I'm not sure if it goes into other states, but it certainly serves Southern West Virginia.
Great. Okay. Yes.
Hello, I'm Ted Steiger. I'm with the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to come here today and come to DC. It's a super important time, and I'm hoping you guys are all going to go to OMB next for a meeting over there to talk about the president's budget. And I just wanted to kind of expand on your question about how can we tell our stories to federal policymakers. Every one of the federal programs that you all mentioned up there are either cut or eliminated in the president's budget. So I just like to expand on that and hear some of your thoughts on how we can continue to tell these important stories and a blend of private, federal, state, local funding that goes into helping rural America. So thank you.
Great. Any thoughts about how I presume you spend some time talking to your members of Congress.
Yeah. Well, it's important, and probably what's more important is to get them out to see what we do. And so we try to have our different Congress people and senators come and have forums and to spend a good part of a day meeting with customers, because if we keep it on a very abstract level, which is numbers, then that's real easy to cut. But when it's stories and it's relationships and it's customer intimacy, I mean, customer intimacy is what we practice. So if we can turn a story into a relationship and extend that relationship into the congressional staffs, that's a huge part of what makes this important to them, as it is important to us.
So for us, every time we have an opportunity to meet with a congressional staffer, we always say, send your entrepreneurs to us, because they actually get a lot of phone calls for folks who want to get into business. And so that creates a really interesting relationship now that we're allowed to say, look, we've helped all these folks that you've sent our way, now we need your help to make sure that this funding stays in place.
I would go back with showcase your success. On a given year, we make an outward gesture to all of our congressional delegation to come down, to ride our trails, to go into our communities, to visit with our local businesses. Showcasing businesses like yours is the best thing we can do. And then you have to come to Washington, D.C. at least once or twice a year. We actually come to Washington, D.C. and bring our success stories with us and sit in front of them and let those success stories tell them how, how much it means that we've got these funds, that these things are happening in our local communities, because there is sometimes a disconnect.
One more question? I know we had someone over here, yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, this way the people on the live stream can hear the question
I
then.
think I have a booming voice, but.
Yeah. Not
Good,
that far.
good afternoon. My name is Jad Daly. I'm with the Trust for Public Land, and thank you for this panel. This was really inspiring. Lupe, I tweeted you out earlier. You said something really cool. You talked about the need for that third space in rural communities. And I want to tell you, my organization is really seeing that. We've done a lot of work over the years helping rural communities get better access to the lands around them, the kinds of things you talked about, Jeffrey. But we're seeing this real hunger from our rural community partners in that third space. Downtown parks, that everyone understands why you need that in Washington, D.C., but people don't understand that rural communities need those spaces too, and creative placemaking opportunities and those kinds of things. So I just wonder if you all could comment on whether you're seeing that broadly, that hunger for the third space in terms of parks and other kinds of those types of gathering places in your communities.
So I'll tell you how we came up with that idea of the third space. We partnered up with a gentleman named Aaron Gonzalez from Edinburgh. He's part of the UTRGV. He helped us establish our business plan. And what was interesting about him is he gathered a lot of information for us. It was very intricate for us. Number one was what the state comptroller in Texas calls spillage. There was certain data that showed that in Raymondville, there was over $8 million being spent in spillage. What spillage is there was no entity like ours or third space, as we're talking about, in our community where people could go and spend that money to have a sit-down dinner with the family and enjoy the time or watch a game too, where they're having to travel to the nearest community, which is Harlingen, Texas, 25, 30 miles away. So we were losing over $8 million in spillage to that community because we wouldn't provide that service in our community. Because we're such a rural community, we're set geographically. If you ever look on a map and Google Raymondville, Texas, we're unique to where the entire valley, we're what's called the gateway to the valley. When you pass Kingsville, Texas, you've got an 80-mile stretch of the King Ranch, which everybody knows the King Ranch, before you get into the valley, and we are the gateway of the valley, meaning you have to come through us to get anywhere in the valley. So we're set apart geographically to where, I tell people, us in Raymondville, or actually Willacy County, we're different animals. Because in Harlingen, kids there, a night out for them on the town is going to the movies, going to the bowling alley. Where kids in our community, I remember growing up, a night out for us on the weekend was going to the dirt road, shooting rabbits, going fishing in the local canals or or Port Mansfield down the road. So we're unique to where we were lacking that third space, which again goes back to our idea of supply and demand. We knew the demand was there. We figured we supply it, we can make some money, and here we are.
So I think the third space is so important to the young people, and to also create that sense of place for young people, which is the first step to having them stay, right, in the next generation. And so one other area in Dumas, Arkansas, where we're creating this entrepreneurial ecosystem, that was the #1 priority in that community. Because right now the third space is a McDonald's that they have to share between the folks that are there in the morning and then the folks who come for dinner at night, and there's really no space for them. And so that's why we want them to franchise, so that we can figure out how to bring that to Arkansas.
In southern West Virginia, it's no secret we have an opioid epidemic, and our communities, because of that, have realized the true value of having that place for the young folks to go, that next generation to go, where the community can go, whether it be a restaurant or a community center. And I think that it's become a lot more relevant and prevalent that we need those, but they've been very slow to develop due to lack of resources. But I think it's something all of our communities have realized is necessary, and is actually a good step in stopping some of these other problems and issues we have.
Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you all, and I want to mention also what?
Just
Gabby says hi, his daughter just tweeted.
Okay, so we want to tell everyone who didn't hear that Lupe's daughter has now tweeted saying Gabby says hi. And we want to thank all of our Twitter people, Twitterers, as well as people who have stayed in touch via the hashtag Rural Innovation. We have more questions than we had time for, but having just mentioned natural resources and spaces, I do want to mention that the very next session in the series is going to be April 20th, Thursday, same time, same Aspen space. And in the meantime, or before we go there, I want to thank our panel today. I want to thank Jeffrey. I want to thank Inez, Lupe, Dennis, and Joyce, and thank all of you.
Good job.